catastrophic train derailment that continues to shake East Palestine, Ohio, many believe it's being further exacerbated by the actions of President Biden. As the air and water become polluted with toxic materials, has President Biden abandoned his duties? If the left believes that America's first is bad, does that mean that only alternative is America last? Because this is exactly what Biden is preaching now. Rather than provide comfort and leadership for his own country, he has gone abroad to Ukraine and Poland to show his support there. The people of East Palestine are not pawns in a political game. They are American citizens who deserve respect and empathy from their leaders. Rural communities like East Palestine have suffered greatly in recent years, and it is time for our elected officials who prioritize their needs and work towards a better solution for all involved, including neighboring Pennsylvania. What do we make of this? Today marks 22 days, and just on Thursday, the first high-ranking official from the president's cabinet entered Palestine, Ohio. Will this signal that they get the attention that they deserve instead of the neglect that they have seen? Welcome to this Saturday edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show, and thank you so much for joining us. We're so honored to have the chief rabbi from Ukraine joining us via satellite. Rabbi Moshe Azman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
What do you think America's interest is in Ukraine, and why should we continue to give billions of dollars to Ukraine, and you're being a man of the cloth and understanding the suffering when many Americans are suffering at home?
You know, I'm now in Ukraine. All from the beginning of the war in Ukraine, I'm here, and I was under the hard Russian attacks. I saw the crime of war what the Russians do. And personally, I was born in Russia, but what I saw here, it's very terrible things. The Ukrainian people was so many tragedies in their lives. Many people was killed, many people was wounded, many people lost their homes. That's why, first of all, as we thank America for your support, because without support of America is Ukraine, without your help with weapons, with money, with everything, with humanitarian aid, Ukraine cannot be to resist the Russian aggression. That's why you Americans help to Ukrainians to save their lives, and that's why I think it's not only Ukrainian problem, because the Russians it's war not only against Ukrainians, it's war against all free world. That's why they said, for example, the Russians said that we come here to make denazification. But what does it mean, denazification? They said not only Ukrainian. They said the Nazi, that's what they say at the beginning. But they said the European is Nazi and Nazis, and the American Nazis. I saw the Russian programs in TV. It's real so big lie. That's why I think the Ukrainians stand now the front line to resist, to save the all free world. That's why I think it's very important that America, United States help to Ukraine. Thank you.
You know, how do you define that help, and how are we assured that that help, the resources that is being spent, is really going to uplift, change their lives, and sort of give the Ukrainians as much help and support against the disaster that they're facing? First of all,
I think how to check. I'm not professional how to check, but I think you in America have the professionals how to check. But first of all, in Ukraine, it's Ukrainian. It's the most important is the weapons. Weapons. It's how to resist the country, because the Russians is they have with a lot of weapons and very big army, and Ukrainian is they have this spiritual struggle, and they united and they fight for freedom and for their countries. They don't want to be slaves. How to check? You know, it's first of all, I think you have professionals. I know that professionals from America come here and check what's going. I'm not from the government. I'm by myself. Day and night I work with my volunteer groups to bring humanitarian help and to help people to survive people.
You know, what is fascinating that when you look at the world, you have strife in Africa, you have the wars, the warlords. America itself invaded Iraq and Libya, and those people continue to suffer today. There's so much suffering in the world, there's so much destruction. It seems as though there's this drumbeat for another World War III. How do we determine, given the world, and obviously America does the best job of sharing its resources and its riches in places where people suffer their strife, but how do we make the determination where we spend those resources and who gets to decide who invades where?
Sorry. I think that it's not the same thing. What's happened in America, first of all, is American people, usual, they bring the freedom to all the world and to stay for freedom. But what happened here is not the same thing in another world. Now in Ukraine, you know, it's in the middle of Europe, one big country, one of the second army of the world, they decided to come and to cage, to take for the slavery another country, a free country that these people would like to live free and to not be a slave. That's why it's clear. It's clear that Ukrainian people, if you will not help us, the Russian will make a genocide here, and it's clear. Genocide and will kill us about. We saw what's happening today. I was now in Kiev. I was in Bucha, Irpin, now in clear near Kiev, and I saw there. And only today, they make mass killing there, and in another places they destroyed the Mariupol city and destroyed many cities and kill a lot of civilians. And if you know resist Russia now, Russia say clear. We go to Poland, we go to countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and another European countries. I think it's it's a World War II. The people say no, we don't resist.
Well, do you believe that Biden and his administration should commit American soldiers on the ground in Ukraine?
Sorry, I am a rabbi. I'm not political. I'm not political. I'm not a war. I'm not a specialist. I think Ukrainian people and Ukrainian president don't ask to. I know they don't ask to American soldiers to come, but they said we agree with our soldiers to resist country and this free world, but give to us the weapons, give to us enough weapons, give us, we don't have enough weapons, please give us, that's it, and we'll take our lives but give out how to resist a free world. I think it's and America have to do much more. It's so
let me ask
my
you.
position.
Let me raise this spiritual question with you, Rabbi, and it's such an honor having you on today. You know, Ukraine at one time was the biggest arms dealer in the world. They supplied the arms to a lot of the conflict, where a lot of people died as a result. As a spiritual leader, what are your thoughts on the role that Ukraine played in arming the world and the violence that pursued?
1 second, as translation.
По поводу вооружения. Раньше Украина была одним из главных поставщиков оружия по всему миру и участником, собственно, конфликтов, в которых погибло много людей. Что вы думаете, как религиозный лидер?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm no clear so English. First of all, Ukrainian, what it was in Ukrainian is many years ago. Ukraine didn't want part of conflicts. Ukrainian maybe sell the weapons, but it was 20 years ago. And now the previous presidents it was corrupt here. They sell all the I don't know all the what they had weapons. But Ukrainian didn't involve the conflicts as Ukrainian, I think Ukrainian just 30 years that Ukrainian become independent state. It was Soviet Union. I was born in Soviet Union. I was born in Leningrad in Russia, in the same town that Putin was. I know what's a communism, and I know by myself what's happening now. It's more than last communist time. Now is a time what Russia do. It's close to Stalin time. That's why.
What else can Rabbi Americans do to provide support to Ukrainians that are in need beside their prayers? What else do you implore us to do to show support for that catastrophic situation that continues?
First of all, I think American president have all rights. The Congress and the Senate gave him to give to Ukrainian land lease, and but I don't understand why land lease doesn't work. In the World War II, land lease helped to Soviet Union to win for Russia for Nazi Germany. And now the Ukrainian president can without ask Congress Senate can give Ukraine all the weapons that they need. And I think American people now, first of all, I would like to thank all people, Republicans, Democrats, all together, they united to help to Ukraine. And I'm here. I'm not Ukrainian. I'm Jewish. I'm a rabbi. My work is save people. I try to bring them warm and what you need. It's Russians. They attack infrastructure, and people sit in the cold without electricity, without warming. It's a crime of war here. That's why I think America is the first law of America to save people, to save to the people that need help. And I think now if Ukrainian will win, and will win of the United States all world. Russia. Who friends of Russia? Iran, Syria, North Korea, and Belarus. That's it.
Rabbi Azman, it's such a pleasure having you join us today, and we're certainly going to keep Ukraine and your country in our prayers, and that this war will stop and that we can return to some kind of normalcy. I know it's not an easy position that you find yourself in, but thank you so much for joining our broadcast today, and we wish you well.
God bless America, and God bless Ukraine, and Mashiach, Messiah now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll be back. Don't go away. And welcome back to the broadcast. I'm so glad E.J. Antoni, a research fellow at the Regional Economic Center for Data Analysts, is joining us. Where are we, E.J.? That doesn't look like E.J. to me, but...
This is Joel.
Joel. Oh, Joel Griffith, don't worry. Sometimes all this stuff run together. But listen, how serious is this debt ceiling? Are we going to falter? Kevin McCarthy had so much writing on this debt ceiling. He's done so well so far, especially given how he became Speaker, but he's played his hands quite correctly. How will this test him? Because remember, you have 40 members of the Freedom Caucus, and if he blinks, he can lose them all.
Yeah, well, it's very important that the conservative members of the House, that they actually stand strong right now, because there is a lot of pressure, both from within the Republican caucus, but of course from the Democrats and from President Biden, to actually give in and to raise this debt ceiling without actually putting in place the spending reforms that we need. Yes, it's important that we not default on the debt, but it's just as important that we get our spending under control, because the amount of debt now that we have incurred, it is, think about this, we've got $31 trillion of debt right now. If interest rates are just 5% on that debt, you're talking about close to $10,000 per family of four per year, just on that debt alone.
But am I hearing you echo there may be a principled reason to default on the debt ceiling?
Well, there's a principled reason for sensible Congresspeople to stand firm and refuse to lift this ceiling unless there are dollar-for-dollar spending cuts going forward. For every dollar that debt ceiling is increased, we need to be ensured that we're going to see dollar-for-dollar spending cut going forward, and we should really be freezing the spending levels at the last fiscal year's spending. When you're spending $4 trillion per year, this is a massively bloated federal government. We've seen the impact of that with the central bank printing trillions of dollars to fund this deficit spending. American families are squeezed right now. And this debt ceiling debate is an opportunity for those in Congress who are actually concerned about our future to hold firm and say, we're not going to lift this debt ceiling unless these spending reforms are made.
Leon Benjamin, you're a former Navy combat veteran. You're a father. You study these issues. Your thoughts?
Look, we can't keep spending money that we don't have. That's the easiest way to look at it. You can't take a credit card that has a $5,000 limit and you are at $4,999 and think you're going to go out there and spend another $1,000. The principle just, it stands true. They have to find a way to be able to, again, spend, but spend within their budget. And if you make a budget and keep raising the ceiling, you're basically telling America that we're going to keep putting you in more and more debt. And again, the debt moves down the road.
But think about the economic implications if the United States government is not able to raise the ceiling, and we've never, ever defaulted on our debt.
Well, I'm sorry, if you look at
every time you raise a debt ceiling and we don't cut spending, we're basically saying we'll take care of it someday. We'll take care of the deficit someday. And that someday always gets pushed down the road. And we have to find a way where we can cut. There are plenty of places where spending can be cut. And we're not talking about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We're talking about the 87,000 IRS agents and things that are within our government that's not operating, that's not working.
Joe,
should not be operating.
Joe, help us understand what this debt ceiling is, and as Leon is indicating, where we can possibly cut, and because we're talking about massive cuts, where do you recommend those massive cuts can take place?
Well, if you look, first of all, let's think about where we've been the last 3 years. Over the last 3 years, we've added $8 trillion to the national debt. We get lost in these numbers. $8 trillion of added debt is more than $120,000 per family of four in this country, just in government debt. If you would roll back the spending levels just to several years ago, you would actually have a budget that is much closer to balance. And it's very important that we deal with these problems now, because it's going to become harder and harder if we wait to make the needed reforms to our social spending programs. The longer we wait, the more difficult it's going to be to reform them, and the more we're likely going to have to rely, politicians are going to make us rely on the printing presses of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, but we don't want our audience to think that this is a Biden problem. Trump did the same. The Republicans are just as guilty as the Democrats.
Well, you are exactly right that during the prior administration, we saw Republican Congress and Republican president teaming up with Democrats to enact massive spending during the COVID era. Think about all the trillions of dollars of spending that were unleashed on the economy, giving people thousands of dollars worth of stimulus checks, paying businesses not to operate. You know, those shutdowns were immoral and wrong from the start. No Republican or Democrat should have gone along with those shutdowns. And then to see a group of Republicans and Democrats coming together in Congress to just turn on the spending spigot, you are exactly right. This has been a bipartisan problem caused by Republicans and Democrats and American families. Now, if you look at disposable income, what families have to spend after paying all their basic expenses, we saw the sharpest drop in that disposable income last year since the Great Depression. So the pain that families are feeling now is not imaginary. It is the worst pain that most people have ever felt financially, unless you were actually around 90 years ago, and most people, of course, were not. So it's important that Republicans and Democrats come together to actually put the brakes on this and tell President Biden, you're not getting $1 more on that spending limit unless we put in place spending cuts.
You know, Leon, yesterday was the anniversary of the war in Ukraine, and Putin is talking up in his arsenal and removing himself from the treaty. I know his foreign minister came out and said it's just rhetoric. I mean, where is this? What started out as a territorial war is becoming a global war. Where are we going with this? And is it justifiable that America has made this almost a proxy war?
Well, it looks like World War III on the brink, and unless we have some diplomacy going on right now, it's going to expand, that we will not have any other option but to get involved. Because we're talking about Poland, we're talking about other nations that are in NATO that are now going to suffer because of this expanded war that should have never even really occurred.
Let me give you an interesting statistic. The president loves to boast of the 145, whatever NATO countries they are. 133 have supported the condemnation of Russia. But in reality, only 33 have placed sanctions in place. You know, I mentioned to the rabbi earlier, who gets to decide to invade a sovereign? We invaded Libya, we invaded Iraq, we justified it, and we realized that some of the justification was just straight out lies. It was not even true. And it seems as though we don't find out what the real culprit for us being in these conflicts until decades and decades later, when the real players involved are dead. What are our interests there? And is it worth eventually us spilling any American blood as a result? I don't think most people want this war. And the Republicans just handed down this week, you got to justify this spending.
What I love about prior administrations that work for peace through strength and diplomacy, that you can have enemies that you don't have to keep fighting every single moment. And that's what other administrations learned. You know, Reagan said, tear down the wall. Trump said, okay, I know what you got, but know what we got. And let's be able to negotiate, and let's be able to trade, or let's be able to prosper, but we don't have to go to war. This administration seems that the only way we can prosper is go to war, and that's not true. $800 billion have gone out of our pockets, the American people.
And how much of it has it gone to the military-industrial complex?
Almost all of it.
Almost all of it. It's just a fact. You know, it is scary to think of this drumbeat to war, and it seems as though the mainstream media is not holding anyone accountable to ask the very tough questions about what is the end game. I mean, this past week, Biden upped his rhetoric against Putin. Joel?
Look at what's happened over the last few years under President Biden's administration. It's no surprise that Vladimir Putin, the villain, the evil dictator that he is, that he chose to act in such a manner aggressively against his neighbor. Think about the tens of thousands of civilian lives that Vladimir Putin has indiscriminately targeted in his terror campaign against his peaceful neighbor. But it's no surprise that he was empowered after the Biden administration demonstrated weakness in regards to our own border, fled Afghanistan, leaving our friends actually stranded at the hands of the Taliban. To see the weakness that we have portrayed towards China and China's aggression towards Taiwan, it's no surprise that Putin acted in such a way. And to compound this, if you look at how Europe made themselves dependent on natural gas deliveries because they wanted to go ahead and embark on their mission of their Green New Deal across Europe and instead made themselves dependent on Russian energy, this is an amalgamation, just a disaster that we have walked ourselves into. But that being said, I think it's very important that we continue to demonstrate our support for Ukraine, but in responsible ways. And there's a way to do this responsibly so that we can achieve peace and ensure that Russia does not actually gain what they seek to gain against their neighbor.
This is the Armstrong Williams Show. Leon, Joel, and I will be back after these messages. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. If we begin with the micro view of what signals did Joe Biden send to the world in January of 2021, let's start with Afghanistan and what it said about our national security policy, the earlier withdrawal, leaving all our equipment and all the cash left behind, leaving our allies on the ground with no cover. Clearly, as Joe spoke about, this portrayal of weakness and not having the guts and the backbone to hang in there certainly began sending a signal, particularly to our allies, defining what the Biden administration would do, Leon.
Yeah, well, again, once an enemy sees your weakness, they're going to keep on going until you stop them. And what Biden did, one of the blunders, the greatest blunders in military history of pulling out of Afghanistan early, was showing our allies, not just our enemies, that you're leaving the people so vulnerable to attack. And once an enemy sees that, you just open up the floodgates for everybody to say, well, it's my turn. Since he's showing weakness, and you do not show weakness to an enemy, never. And again, Reagan said peace through strength, and we have to some kind of way get our military back into the hands of a mindset that we can no longer keep giving up territory. Every time, look at this war with Ukraine. Territory. We're giving up territory to our enemies. It's going to send a signal around the world. What else can we take? Let's go take something else. Let's go take Taiwan. Let's just go and see what other territories that America is now showing, since it's showing weakness. Let's see what else we can go capture.
You know, Jon Hartley is an economic researcher with Young Voices. Jon, help us understand the state of our supply chain. Help us understand the fact that the Fed is talking about raising interest rates again. How will that impact? Let's talk about excessive money that is still in the economy that needs to be taken out. Let's also talk about the fact that a lot of what we spent during the pandemic and on COVID has also impacted where we are as an economy and in the housing crisis. What is it that is in the economy that not only the administration, but the Republicans in Congress need to do to change this economic spiraling out of control that many Americans are facing today, everyday Americans?
Well, it's a very interesting time in that we're seeing inflation for the first time in about 40 or so years. Some of this has sort of been initially triggered by the pandemic and perhaps some supply chain issues, but the trillions of dollars in new spending and deficit spending certainly has been more fuel to the fire. Now, the Fed has been slow to respond to this renewed sort of increase in inflation, and I think it's becoming increasingly clear that the Fed is going to have to raise interest rates more than we maybe even thought it would a few months ago. Most were sort of have been expecting that the Fed would stop its interest rate increases around 4 or 5% to quash what has been about now 6% inflation as of January, both around that for both core and headline measures, whether you include food and fuel or not. But you're absolutely right. Inflation actually hurts the poor the most. The poor spend an outsized amount of their income on consumption-related goods. They spend a disproportionate amount on things like fuel and food. So it really hurts them the most. And so, the fact that the Fed is now sort of caught up, but still not has not raised interest rates to the level of inflation, I think it's somewhat concerning in that the Fed hasn't been as fast to respond as perhaps it should. But the fact that inflation isn't coming down perhaps as fast as many have been hoping for with the latest reading from January is a bit concerning. And I think you're beginning to see some major repricing in financial markets right now with both risk assets like stocks as measured by the S&P 500 for U.S. stocks or interest rates, long-term bond interest rates continuing to rise, that I think we're sort of entering a new sort of consensus around how high the Fed has to hike to get inflation under control. And that also has a lot of implications for the likelihood of a recession. If you look at sort of the three main causes of recessions in the post-war era, they generally are either things like asset bubbles, like the tech bubble or the housing bubble in the late 90s and 2000s, or are things like pandemics, second, or things like, and the most common cause of recessions are actually Fed interest rate hikes. And so I think the possibility of a recession is really high. And this also ties into the whole federal debt situation that we're facing right now with the debt limit, which the CBO projects will be hit sometime between July and September. But interest rates really matter for this discussion in the sense that the future path of debt changes a lot when interest rates are, say, 4% compared to 1%. Where they have been between 1% to 2% on long-term interest rates. So if we are in a world where inflation is going to be higher for some sustained period of time, that has a lot of implications for debt as well, and just how soon we actually have to get our fiscal house in order. All this is not great news in general, and there have to be some tough decisions that are made in the years to come. And raising interest rates to quell inflation is also sort of one of those tough but necessary decisions.
Joel, when you think about Roosevelt and Kennedy and Nixon and Reagan, they had to make some very tough decisions, and they understood how to use the power of the presidency to bring about the necessary changes that will begin the process of changing the crises that they were facing at the time. Is our president using all the tools in his arsenal with the power of the presidency? Are there things that he should have put in place? Are there things that he should put in place there now? Are there policies that he needs to tweak? What does he need to do at least to start turning this around?
Well, first, the president needs to actually acknowledge that we have a problem. But when you hear the president go on television and talk about our booming economy and a booming jobs market and inflation coming down, he's ignoring reality. He's ignoring the fact that inflation last year was the highest in 40 years. He's ignoring the fact that if you look to buy a house right now, you're spending $12,000 more per year on your mortgage and insurance and taxes than you were just a year and a half ago. He's ignoring the fact that American families have taken a pay cut, and every time the president talks about the jobs market, he's ignoring the fact that we have lost almost 5,000 full-time jobs each and every week going back to May. So first, the president needs to acknowledge the problem, but second, he would have to actually reverse some of the policies that he's put in place. I'm speaking the one policy area where he could actually make a difference would be to stop suppressing production of affordable, abundant energy here at home. When you see the president declaring war on fossil fuels, this is deterring companies from making investments in infrastructure and pipelines and exploration, and instead they're sitting on that cash or delivering it back to their shareholders because this administration has told them that they hope that those fossil fuel companies are out of business in the next 20 years.
You know, Leon, just on Thursday, mortgage rates jumped again. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? People not buying homes. I mean, you've not seen these kind of interest rates and mortgage rates since the 80s.
Yeah, the whole idea, again, is to cause a divide in America when our founding fathers said, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which represented the ownership of property. But when you cause a divide like that, the haves and the have-nots, it causes a bitter taste in the mouths of American citizens who say, look, this is America. This is the place where I can dream of starting at zero and becoming a hero. And so all these things, I believe, are planned by design to keep dividing America. And we have to stop the division. We have to stop it. And lowering the interest rates, which is possible, can be done, but then we have to, again, curtail the spending. It's all a combination of things that must be done that this administration is refusing to do right now, this time.
Jon, what does it say about the market that all of a sudden mortgage rates are jumping again?
Well, you know, we think about the housing market right now. Housing.
Jon Hartley. Jon.
I was just going to say, Joel and Jon sound a lot alike. No, I think it says that you know, these interest rate hikes are working, and this is sort of part of the pain, the necessary pain that is sort of required to bring down inflation. One of the main, most essential components of the monetary transmission mechanism is through the housing market. When the Fed raises interest rates like it has over the past year by roughly 5%. That's on short-term interest rates, so things like your short-term money market funds. Those are all sort of short-term interest rates. But ultimately, you would expect mortgage rates to rise, and that's exactly how monetary policy works. And the purpose is to cool housing markets to some degree. We're starting to see home prices fall in many metropolitan areas around the country. And that's all about cooling down the economy and getting prices to fall or to not grow as fast. And so that's part of the sort of disinflation that the Fed is trying to engineer. Now, how high the Fed has to raise interest rates, how long does it take these interest rate hikes to feed its way into the economy to bring down the rate of inflation is sort of the big question, right? There's this question about Milton Friedman's famous saying, about having long and variable legs, monetary policy having long and variable legs. How long those legs are is still sort of a big research question, and a question that many are trying to figure out in terms of understanding how much tightening is required by the Fed to bring inflation back to its 2% target.
I want to thank all my guests today, the Ambassador, Joel, John, Leon, for joining me. And just in case I forgot to tell you, Darnell Parr and her husband, Russ Parr, will be joining us coming up next to talk about the longevity of marriage and the foundation of a family in her new book, and why marriages can still work if you have the right ingredients. That and much more when we return on this edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
So, Darnell, welcome to the broadcast. Just in case I forgot to tell you, your new book. What inspired you to write this book?
My daughter. I saw a movie, and I thought about what would happen if I wasn't here to give her all the lessons that I had learned. So I just started writing down things that I wanted her to know as a woman.
Not about your two sons.
Not about my two sons. I knew they would be fine because women just move through life differently. So I just wanted her to have advice from her mom about being a woman.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I started writing when she was about 1. I started writing down notes, what I wanted her to know.
You know, I would introduce your husband. He walked off the set. I don't know where he thinks he is. I've never seen anything like that.
There I am.
He walks off the set. What is going on? Are you kidding me? Well, let me introduce, now that he's back on the set, there he is, Russ Parr. Oh my goodness, I've never seen anything like this. But anyhow, you and Russ have been married for how long?
30 years.
30 years?
Yes. Was
this book a part of you having your own identity?
It wasn't. It was really just giving my daughter advice.
And what do you want women and men to take away from your book, just in case I forgot to tell you?
I wanted them to know that you can stand in your truth, speak up for yourself, for my daughter, be a lady, and demand respect.
Demand respect. So Russ, your wife has written her first book. I know you are a proud husband, but listen, man, you guys have been married for 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you surprised that you've been married to him for 30 years?
A little.
Oh, come on. It has a lot to do with the fact that I'm extremely handsome, okay? That has a lot to do with it. And I owe her a lot of money, so let's just be honest about the whole thing.
So what is it that you tell your daughters to look for in a husband? Is it the father, the man that you're married to?
It is. I think she has just watched us over the years and how we interact with one another. And I was talking to her the other day, and she was telling me the qualities she looked for in a man. And I realized everything she was saying is how her father treats her.
And how important is it to have a father in the household?
I think it's really important. I think it's really important, especially when it has to do with being married. You're showing your daughter and your sons how to be a man of the house and how to be a father and how to be a husband. So I think it's really important.
You know, Russ, it's fascinating. Your wife looks like your daughter.
Well, I hope so. At least that's what the judge told me.
I must tell you, listen, I loved it when you said, don't give yourself to everyone in the book.
No. You give yourself to everyone, you'll just have pieces of yourself. So you just need to be whole and save yourself.
And you also said, which I think is important, don't compare yourself to anyone. No. It's almost a crime to do so against yourself.
It really is. I know women are always competing with looks, likes, and I just wanted women, especially my daughter and other women, to know don't compete with anyone. Just be yourself. You're your only competition. That's it.
Russ, how important is it to be a role model, an example? You and your wife are successful, you're blessed in that way, but how important is that in the household to be an example for the kids?
Well, I really focused a lot on my boys, and obviously my daughter was very important. I think the big thing for us is that we were kind of like a team, and we often put our kids in a position that they could negotiate if there's an issue. We always played court, and I would be the judge, and my wife, it was usually the defendant, and my son say, "Mom made me do this and that and blah, blah, blah." And they would get so mad because I never ruled in their favor. And my dad always said, "Well, look, he's sleeping with the judge," you know. But that was a big thing. We're just like a team. Where I was weak, she was strong. She was a disciplinarian. I'm one of those kind of guys that if I raise my voice at my kid, I go in there 10 minutes later and go, "I'm so sorry, don't be mad at me." But not her. And I think that's what helped us a lot, is the fact that she made it very, she felt that discipline was just so important to keep our boys and our daughter grounded, keep them busy doing activities that weren't subversive and against the, you know, the societal norms. And one of the things about my wife in this book, what was interesting is that for so many years, Armstrong, she was just like writing all these little tidbits on pieces of paper and throwing them in the desk drawer or something. And I'm like, she's been doing it over 20 some odd years. I'm like, you know what? That's advice. And these little bits of nuggets of information and wisdom, I think you need to share it with other people and not just, you know, our daughter. And I think she took those words to heart, and there we have it, just in case I forgot to tell you.
You know, I must tell you, for full disclosure, your son, Braxton, worked for us for a few years. And I'm telling you, one of the brightest, humblest, kindest, hardest working. I mean, he was almost like a son to me. I mean, Braxton Parr, his parents. I can only imagine when people read about their kids today and the drugs and the crime and the interactions with law enforcement, they're moving back home because they can't get their lives together. You must feel proud of what you and Russ have been able to accomplish. That has to be the greatest achievement for parents, what your children become.
Absolutely. That's my greatest accomplishment, how my children have turned out. They've turned out pretty good, if I do say so myself.
And one of your sons worked for Google.
Yes.
In New York.
Yes.
And your daughter is on television.
Yes.
She's on TV. I mean, do other parents ask you and Russ for your recipe?
They do. People who have younger children, they will ask me, how did we do it? And Russ made a good point. We were great partners with raising our kids. He was not the disciplinarian, and he would get mad at me sometimes about disciplining them, but he sees that it worked out in the long run.
Kids need structure.
Absolutely.
Russ?
Yeah.
But you had structure growing up.
Yeah.
And your father's still living.
Yes, he is 94 years old, and he still gives me heck, which is good. It keeps me grounded. I think the big thing for children and what we did, we were present. One thing I love about my wife, she was just like my mom. And I lost my mom when I was fairly young, and my mom was present. My wife would, if we promised our kids we were going to do something, I said, I don't feel like it, I'm exhausted, and so on and so forth. We told them we would be there. And we showed up. I mean, we had our daughters in cheer and gymnastics and the whole nine. We drive all over the East Coast to attend some of her events. And sometimes I didn't want to go, but you have to give support. And I realized that if we had not done that, I'm not sure if our kids would have turned out the way they are, and they're constantly growing. Darnell, what was that thing that Tom Hanks once said?
Oprah asked him what kind of parent he was, and he said he wouldn't know until his children were adults. So
wow.
I always love that.
And that's true, isn't it?
It really is.
Let me come back to the book, On the Mark, Mirror, Mirror. There are all kinds of tidbits. Tell our audience about how this book, the composition of the book, and why they can go out and buy it. It's an easy read.
It's really easy to read. That's what I've been telling people. A lot of the things my mom said to me when I was growing up.
Nuggets.
Some of the things I told friends, family members. So it's really just a collection of advice from women. There's one of the sayings in the book that you can't put an old head on a young body. That's what I'm trying to do.
You know, what is interesting, it's obvious you have a special bond with your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
He has a special bond with his sons, but it doesn't take away from each other.
No.
It strengthens the bond.
Yes. I have a good bond with my boys, too. And Russ is such a strong male presence in their life and my daughter's life. And we just kind of balanced it. But yes.
But before we say goodbye, in a minute and a half that we have left, what would you say the top two things are for the longevity of a marriage?
Still learning.
Still learning. That's interesting.
No, I think you have different phases in your marriage. When we were raising our kids, that was one phase, and we dated to make sure we stayed connected. So I think that's one thing. Make sure you're always connected with your spouse, because your children leave, and then you just have your spouse in the house with you. And people always say communication. I think that's really important.
Russ?
Keeping the toilet seat down and clean up while you're cooking.
Yes, absolutely.
I cook. I love to cook. Why do I have to clean up while I'm cooking when we haven't eaten anything yet? It doesn't make sense. And she would get annoyed and irritating. So I've learned to adapt over the years. And basically, I keep the toilet seat down, and the kitchen is spick and span when I'm done cooking. And by that time, I'm not even interested in eating what I cooked.
Not quite.
That worked for me.
Well, the good news is cleanliness is where you find God.
Absolutely.
So that is my philosophy. So you're all right. But look, I encourage people to go out and buy the book. In case I forgot to tell you, Darnell's first book, I'm so proud of her. And she is so laid back and so cool on TV. And I know she doesn't do a lot of TV.
No,
I know. I can tell.
Armstrong, can I tell you one thing?
No, you can't, because we're out of time.
I got you.
We can talk about it on our show tomorrow at 8:50 a.m. on Fridays, but not today. We're out of here, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Go out and get the book. In case I forgot to tell you, have a good day. Okay.